Hello my beautiful co-creators, Lidu here from amazing Ashland in Oregon on this beautiful Juicy Living tour, and today I'm with Neale Donald Walsch. Hello Neale.
Hi.
It's wonderful to be here with you. You definitely made an impact in my life and impacted millions and millions of people's life with your book Conversations with God.
I'm very glad that's true. Thank you for saying that. That was my hope, that it would make a positive impact on the lives of people.
Yeah, there's a lot of people right now going through poverty and a lot of hardships. You actually, right outside of here, somewhere outside of Ashland, from what I'm hearing, used to live in a tent and was struggling to find the food, the money to be able to eat. What would be your recommendation for people going through really hard times right now to still connect to their spiritual, that want still spiritual growth, but are struggling with the basic needs?
I think I would say the most basic need is your spiritual growth. And even if they're struggling for what you call basic needs, I think that is not when the struggle for spiritual growth should be subordinated or made less, but in fact probably made more, increased. Because if there's going to be any, how would I put it, resource that would be powerful and extraordinarily helpful during difficult times, it would be God and our connection with the divine and our ability to touch in with the part of the divine that exists in us. So I think that the first thing I would say to people who are enduring difficult times is to not disconnect, but reconnect with the part of themselves that is an aspect of divinity itself. And here's why. In addition to simply providing comfort, when we open ourselves to the divinity that is within each of us, when we get in touch with what my friend Gary Zukav would call the seat of the soul, we open ourselves to a level of wisdom and insight about life and how it works that provides us opportunities to embrace ideas, thoughts, solutions, approaches to the problem that I swear we never would have thought of before. We start seeing life in a whole different way. And we also, in addition to bringing wonderful thoughts and wonderful new ideas and new resources to our life, in addition to that, we call upon the universal source of all power to provide us with just the right opportunity, just the right opening to get us out of this mess that we're in. My favorite prayer is this one. Thank you, God, for helping me to understand that this problem has already been solved for me. Has already been solved for me. So instead of trying to call a solution to us, instead of asking God for help or trying to bring a solution to us, we are announcing that the solution is already here. And our opportunity is to step into it, and to step into it fully, and I want to say immediately, as quickly as our mind will allow.
Even if all the outside doesn't
especially for all the outside. You see, judge not by appearances. You see, the mind will create one story after the other to convince us that what is really true at a spiritual, metaphysical level is not true. we've fallen down the rabbit hole, and we're listening to the Mad Hatter. He's pouring tea into a cup with no bottom, and he is swearing that what is so is not so, and what is not so is so. And we've bought into the illusion. We've taken the blue pill, and instead of the red pill, and so we're in the matrix. And we are believing what the matrix is showing us rather than what we know to be really true. So especially if the appearances are dire and horrible and look like there's no way out. But Lulu, the question is larger than the question you're asking, because it isn't just about how to solve the problem or how to get out of this mess. The real question is how to deal with this mess while we're in this mess. And that is a process by which we recontextualize the whole experience. It is about taking what's happening to us right now and changing our mind about it, changing our thought about it.
And about ourselves, too.
Exactly. It's about holding it in a new way. It's about embracing the present circumstance just the way it is, without it really needing to be any different, and beholding the opportunity in that, and beholding the gift in that. Because, as Conversations with God says, what you resist persists. But what you look at, and I mean look at with the eyes of the soul, what you look at disappears. That is, it ceases to have its illusory form. And when we see what's going on in our lives for what it really is, and when we get in touch with what's really important in life, suddenly our situation doesn't feel so dire. It doesn't feel so terribly, terribly desperate. And when that feeling of desperation, that feeling of panic, that feeling of, oh my God, what am I going to do? When that feeling leaves us, the energy shift inside of us is quite remarkable. And even just that energy shift alone begins to set up an energy field, what I call a contextual field, that creates the possibility of something other than what we're now experiencing showing up in our life, being created in our life through the process of non-resistance. We need to look at what's really important, though. See, when we are in touch with why we're here, who we are and why we're here on the earth, what is our purpose, what is our function, what is our intention, what is the reason, you know, as the beautiful French would say, what's the raison d'etre for it all? And the reason for being has nothing to do with my house, my car, my job, my income, my possessions. So you're talking to a person who has actually lost it all. I was, as you mentioned, living on the street. I was living in a tent. I had nothing. I had lost everything. I was a street person. And not for a week or two, not for a month or so, but for a year. To live on the street for a year is an enormous education. It's an extraordinary experience to be panhandling, as they say in this country, to be asking people on the street for quarters and dimes. Could you give me something, anything? A dime, a nickel, anything. Because if you get enough nickels from enough people, you can actually have a sandwich and get through the day. So when you're in that situation, you suddenly take a real look at what's truly important and why you're really here and what you really need to be the thing called happy. And I got very clear during that time that my life really, at the bottom of it all, at the basis of it all, had nothing to do with the car I was driving, the house I was living in, the clothes I had, the job that I had, the money that I earned. It really had nothing to do with any of that. And it was really about the interior experience of my soul. And was I going to achieve the objective? Was I going to reach the goal that I came here to reach? Was I going to do what I came here to do? To the earth, I mean. And what did that have to do with the job I had? or the income or the car I drove, and it turned out, of course, it was nothing to do with any of that. Now, masters have understood this. You talk to a real master, I mean a real spiritual master, interview the Dalai Lama someday, or Thich Nhat Hanh, the wonderful Buddhist monk, and ask Thich Nhat Hanh how concerned he is about the car he's driving, or whether he gets to keep his house, or what his annual income is, or how many lovers he's had that year, or anything at all, that whether he has the right partner in life. We're all trying to find our perfect mate, whatever it is that we think is really important. Ask him, how many of those things are important to him? He'll say, well, let's see, let me count them. I'll count them. How many things are important to me that you mentioned? Actually, 0. None of them are important. Then you say to Thich Nhat Hanh, well, then what is important? He'll say, what is important to me, he'll say, is the experience that my soul has had on its journey. Have I self-realized? Now, Lulu, what I want to tell you is that my year on the street moved me forward in my self-realization process. I'm not self-realized. I'm not Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm not the Dalai Lama. I'm not even close. But I'm closer than I was before. Because I'm on the other side of an enormously powerful experience where I learned what was really important. And I was able to see that my life had nothing to do with those things that I thought it had to do with.
Yeah.
And I spent my 20s, my 30s, and my 40s, 30 years. This happened to me when I was 52 years old. So I was an older man. And I spent the first 30 years of my adulthood trying to get the guy, get the girl, get the car, get the job, get the house, get the promotion, get the office in the corner, get the other house, get the kids, get the grandkids, and do well in life and be happy, trying to be happy. And I realized that the true source of happiness I finally got had nothing to do with any of those things, as I said, but rather had to do with how blissful my soul was and could be in the experience of life, and how close I came to expressing that which I came to express on earth, which is divinity itself. So Lulu, we get to a very important question. What am I doing here? Really, who am I and what am I doing here on the earth? That's the real question. And the answer to the question is, who I am is, I am an aspect of divinity. I am an individuation of God. I am that which is divine in individuated form. And what am I doing here? I've come here to express and to experience what I am. That is, I've come here to express and to experience every aspect of divinity that I can bring through me in the encounter with physical life, so that I might know who I really am, so that God might know itself in its experience through me. That is, what I want to say to you is that I've been told reliably in conversations with God that God's purpose in creating life, physical life all over the universe, is to give God itself an opportunity to express and to experience itself, to know itself in its own experience, and not merely to know itself conceptually. See, it's one thing to say, as an example, I am love, or I am forgiveness, or I am compassion. God is all of those things. But it's one thing for me to sit here and say, I'm a very loving person. But if I have nothing to love, if I don't have anything to love, if I can't express it, that means to push out. If I can't push it out and experience being that, then all I can do is say that I am that. But it's one thing to be something, it's quite another thing to experience it. And God, who is everything, wanted to experience itself. So it created relativity, the relative life in which we live, as the perfect contextual field within which divinity could know itself in its own experience.
You went through a lot of anger, and a lot of people experience anger. Is that always related to ego? Is as long as ego is there?
I think ego is getting a bad rap. I think ego is good. I think that ego, we need to have ego is what really encourages us and allows us to feel really good about ourselves. And I think ego run amok is not okay. Ego that's gotten out of control is another matter. But ego at its basis has gotten a kind of a bad rap. So I don't think that ego necessarily creates anger, but I think what creates anger is the mind thinking that what is going on should not be going on, that something else should be happening. So the mind starts looking at what's happening and saying, it shouldn't be like this. God damn it, it shouldn't be like this. I'm getting pretty mad. This shouldn't be like this. And the master, Thich Nhat Hanh would never say that. For that matter, Byron Katie would never say that. Byron Katie would say, no, obviously it should be like this. You know why I know? Because it is like this. So Byron Katie would say, who's a lovely, lovely person, Katie would say, don't argue with life. It is what it is. And when we stop arguing with life and see it for what it is, see, here's to tie it all together, Lilu. When I was on the street for a year, toward the end of that time, not at the beginning, I went through a lot of anger, like you're talking about, and a lot of frustration and disappointment. But finally, I got to a place where I realized, I see what this is all about. I see what this is. This whole experience that I'm having has been given to me by life as an opportunity for me to really get clear on what's important and who I am and why I'm really here on the earth. And I was so stubborn about it. For me, I had to be hit over the head with a 2x4. I had to really lose everything, lose my family, lose my house, lose my job, lose my income. I almost lost my life. What threw me on the street was I was in an automobile accident in which I had my neck broken. Now, most people with a broken neck, God bless them, don't live. You break your neck, you die. And if you don't die, at the very least, you're paralyzed from here down for life. God bless those folks. Somehow or another, I escaped both. I didn't die and I wasn't paralyzed. But I broke my neck, sure as we're sitting here. But I, just in the right place, 1/4 inch off, and the doctors said, you're so lucky. You're just amazingly lucky that your neck snapped in a place where it wasn't crucial. And there aren't very many places like that in your neck, but you escaped. Now, having escaped death, having escaped life as a paraplegic, and having found yourself on the street with nothing to your name, 1 pair of shoes, 1 pair of pants, 3 shirts. Having gone through all of that, what's really important? Well, Lila, when you face death, when you stare death right in the face, when you stare utter poverty right in the face for a year of your life, you begin to understand what really matters. I'm writing a book called What Really Matters. And the book is actually called The Only Thing That Matters. The Only Thing That Matters. And the book makes the point that 98% of the world's people are spending 98% of their time on the 98% of things that don't matter at all. And they're spending 2% of their time, if they're lucky, and on what really matters.
So how do we know we're spending that time on what really matters?
By the way we feel. When you're spending your time on what really matters, you will feel a certain way. You will feel at peace. You will feel blissful. You will feel calm, and you will feel okay about everything. You will feel, I want to say, fulfilled. Fulfilled. When you are spending your time on what really matters. I talk to married couples all the time, and I say to married couples who come to me for counsel or advice, what really matters in your marriage? And they give me all kinds of stuff. We have to get along. We have to learn how to communicate. We have to be harmonious. We have to stop criticizing each other. We've got to have mutual goals. We have to have the same agenda. I go, no. Okay, yeah, I got it. You made all that stuff up. It sounds good, but you made all that stuff up. Let me tell you what really matters. When was the last time you looked into the eyes of your beloved for 60 seconds without looking away. For 60 seconds, not for a second or two, not just but for 1 solid minute, without saying anything, without touching anything, just looking. When was the last time you did that? And married couples tell me they don't even do it when they're making love. They close their eyes. What? So I say, if you want to save your marriage, the guys come to me when they're in trouble. You want to save your marriage, look into the eyes of your beloved 3 times a day for no less than 60 seconds each time. No counseling, no books, no classes, no courses. Just look into each other's eyes 3 times a day for 60 seconds without blinking. No touching, no talking, just looking. That's all you have to do. You know why? Because if you look into another person's eyes, you get in touch with their soul. And when you get in touch with the soul of another, something extraordinary happens. You fall in love again. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter whether they're black, white, male, female, tall, short, Republican or Democrat. Well, I'm not sure about Republicans. But it really doesn't matter. Which is why we don't look at each other. See, you look at somebody and you look for about 4 seconds. It's about 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. Okay, I've had enough. That's a long time, by the way, to look somebody without blinking. Right in the eye. People start getting nervous at around 5 seconds. At 10 seconds, they feel intruded upon. At 20 seconds, they want to know what the hell you're up to. At 60 seconds, you better know them pretty well, or because you're going to. You see?
Yeah.
I'm writing a book called 60 Seconds to God. And that's all it is. I'm writing 8 books at once. So that's the problem with my life. And that's all that. And by the way, that would solve everybody's problem. If the president of the United States sat down with whoever the new leader is of the terrorist world and just sat in the room with that person for 60 seconds, don't say anything, no touching, no talking, but just sit there and look into that person's eyes for 60 seconds.
That sounds like a movement that
right,
you started.
It's a very powerful thing to do, you see.
Yes.
Because it gets us in touch with who we really are. The car doesn't matter. The house that we live in doesn't matter. The income we make doesn't. It all melts away.
Yes.
It's so simple.
And yet in society we stuff ourselves literally of all kind of books, of workshops, of all these things, when really we do have the solution inside.
You don't have to read another book, with the possible exception of all of mine. But but the truth is, it's not necessary to reach outside of oneself for wisdom. Everyone who's hearing me talking right now knows that everything I've just said is correct. Not because I've said it and I'm so brilliant, but because they already know it. It's inside of them. One of the reasons that my books sell so well, to be honest, is that I know because people write me letters. I get letters, and people say to me, "You wrote my book." They don't say how brilliant you are or what a great book you wrote. They say, "You wrote my book," because they see themselves there. So what I'm suggesting to you, Lilu, is that the wisdom of the ages resides within all of us. And that's the reason we don't need to read books or go to any more workshops or do any more seminars or listen to any more sermons. Well, however, it sometimes serves us to do that because it reminds us. It just reminds us. In a busy world, in a busy life, we get to stop and be reminded of what we already know. And so when we're reading books like that or hearing a lecture like that, we're sitting there in the audience going, see, nobody disagrees because there's nothing new. That's why I can't ever give a bad lecture. It's impossible for me to give a bad lecture. You know that? Because they already agree. I know when I walk into the room, they're going to agree with everything I'm saying.
Well, yet you had a lot of people that came up to you and were angry at you being in this space. Some people are not comfortable being around others that are shining this light. It is confronting for people around us.
Well, it can be. It can be. I've never had anybody come up to me. I mean, the most they do is leave the room. they may walk out and say, this guy's, one person out of 100 may walk away, but my experience through the years has been, and I've been out there now lecturing and writing and so forth for a long time, that most of the people intuitively understand that most of what I'm saying, given that I'm human and that I'm not, always bringing it through with accuracy, but they understand that most of what I'm saying is probably pretty true. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And all they have to do is just live that way. By the way, all I have to do is live that way.
Yeah.
I want you to know that I talk a much better game than I live. If I lived the game that I talk, I'd be a saint. I don't. I talk it much better than I live. But I live it much better than I did 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And a whole lot better than I did 30 years ago. So the me of today is so much different from the me when I was 35. There's no comparison. Which gives you an idea how really bad I was when I was 35, because I'm this bad now.
How about if when we have people in our life that are not, we're confronted, or they're not seeing the presence of God, they're angry at life, or how are you being with these people? How are you inviting them?
Well, I'm being compassionate, understanding, caring, and but I'm not necessarily being physically with them for long periods of time. Mm-hmm. That is, I don't require myself to be in their presence. Mm-hmm. If they're continually, nonstop, angry or confrontive, or not seeing the divinity in any part of life, much less me, I simply say, I'm not choosing now to spend much more time with you.
You have that conversation?
Oh, I've had that conversation with many people. Mm-hmm. And I just say, I'm not making you wrong. You're not wrong. Mm-hmm. This isn't about judgment. Mm-hmm. But I'm simply not choosing in my life to spend my time in this way, because it is not supporting my experience of who I really am. Although I will love to be with you from time to time. I'm not dismissing you from my life. Mm-hmm. We can talk and visit and be together, but I certainly won't be living with you for sure. Mm-hmm. I would never live with somebody who is in that situation of not being supportive and being constantly aggressive and being constantly critical and not seeing the divinity in the situation or in me, or those things you talked of. I would never have a intimate relationship with that person. Well, it couldn't be intimate, because intimacy is about seeing the other person as they actually are. So
so being authentic and really declaring and speaking out and being transparent is a major step also in living this truth and in connecting with others in a truthful way. Because a lot of people walk with masks and try to please others.
Well, they do. But,
and living authentically seems like a really important thing these days.
Of course it is. Of course it is. If people are trying to please others, it's because they do not know who they really are. When you know who you really are and have chosen to step into the living of that, the idea of pleasing someone else becomes less and less useful to you, less and less attractive, less and less beneficial. Because too often, in order to please someone else, you have to abandon who you really are. And betrayal of yourself in order not to betray another is betrayal nonetheless. It's the highest betrayal. So we learn that, as we get older. And we learn that, I'm not going to betray myself anymore. Now, again, I talk a better game than I live, because I still find myself in what I call other pleasing behaviors. But to be good to myself, to be fair to myself, a lot fewer than I did when I was 30. So that's called evolution. That's called progress. That's called growth. So I don't have as many people-pleasing behaviors now as I did 30 years ago. And I think That's a product of age too. You get a few gray hairs on your head, you just don't give a damn anymore, or what people think of you. They either get you or they don't. If they don't get you, that's fine. You learn as you get older that if they don't get you, that's fine, because what age teaches you is that you can get along, whether they like you or not. See, when you're 35 or 25 or 15, that thought never occurs to you. How will I get along without these people liking me? But when you're 60, you get real clear that you can get along just fine without those people liking you.
In all fairness, I think a lot of young generation coming in, including the indigo that you speak a lot, are bringing in some qualities that, and some hard qualities and some emotional qualities that are enabling this these connections and this kind of wisdom to really be present at an early age.
I hope that's true. I hope that's true as pervasively as you suggest that it is. I haven't really, honestly, done enough research about that, or looked at that as closely as perhaps you have. So, but I hope that that's true. I do think it's true to some degree. There's no question about that. I know that's true. It's just a matter of how pervasive it is.
Yeah.
But if we're going to have a new tomorrow, that's going to be the avenue that we're going to have to travel. That's what we'll have to do to create a new future, is to get younger and younger and younger people, more and more generations of us, to think the way we're talking here. Because it's one thing to talk this way when you're 67. It's something else to talk this way when you're 27. And if we had 27-year-old people talking like this, now you got a new world. Yeah, because who listens to old geezers?
We do. Well, Neale, it's amazing, and I think there's another thing that is really important that you talk a lot about is gratitude. How did you find going back to where you were and still today, with challenges that I'm sure you have in your life too, like every person? How do you find those moments to be grateful for, especially when you had nothing, or what seems like nothing? How did you find this place where this seed of light can start
by seeing the gift that was there? See, I couldn't find gratitude. How can you find gratitude if you don't experience the gift? So the first step of gratitude is to see the gift. Now, again, this is a product of being an old person. I'm not so sure that I'm spiritually wise so much as I'm old. But the older you get, the more you value every day, each moment, and stuff matters less and less. It just matters less and less. I mean, stuff that would bother you when you were 25. With respect to all the indigo children. But so at least I'm talking from my experience now. So as an older person, I can tell you that I see the gift in just getting up in the morning. I see the gift in, a cup of coffee, or a pleasant song on the radio, or a beautiful sunrise. I mean, I don't take much of life for granted anymore, as I did when I was younger. But you ask a good question. If you're in the middle of difficulties and problems, how can you feel gratitude? And the answer is you've got to fight to find the gift, even in the difficulty. That's what I was talking about earlier. When you shift your perspective from the perspective of the mind, because I want to tell you something, life will never make sense to your mind. If you're trying to get life to make sense with your mind, you might as well forget it. Because life will never make sense to your mind. Because mind is very logical, and life is not. So in order for life to make sense, you've got to be, I mean this literally, out of your mind. And you've got to be into your soul. But when you begin to see life from the perspective of your soul, then even in the midst, as I was saying earlier, even in the midst of the worst of it, you can see the gift. And when you can see the gift, then you can say, thank you, God. Thank you, God, for this gift, which I would not have been able to perceive had I not embraced the perspective of the soul. But now I see what even this horrible situation is bringing to me. I even see that. But again, I want to say something. This is important because when you see that, when you see the gift and begin to move into gratitude, the very shift away from resisting to gratitude changes the exterior energies such that the situation itself improves, sometimes automatically, without you doing anything. I have a favorite thing that I like to say. Life will resolve itself in the process of life itself. If you simply appreciate life itself. So what I've learned to do is to just go with the flow. Oh, I hate that trite beyond belief, but it's true. Just let the river go by. Stop trying to make the river go where you think the river is supposed to go.
So you let things come more to you now?
I let things come more to me, and if something is coming to me that I don't appreciate or want, I just step aside and let it go. Like I do what I call the Aikido of the mind. Just let it go right past me. And things go past me today that even 10 years ago I would not have let go past me. These days I'm just like, whatever. You know, and I notice that people get upset about things these days that I don't get upset about. Well, aren't you upset about it? And actually, no. And they think I should be. So they're upset for me. I said, well, you're carrying the upset for me. I'll let you carry the upset bucket. I don't need to carry that bucket. You carry that bucket.
How did your relationship with God evolve? Where is it now compared to where it was before?
Well, how it evolved was out of sheer necessity. It was either get to know life and therefore God better, or drop any expectation of a happy life. You know, and I didn't want to be unhappy for the rest of my life. I didn't want to be so unhappy that I even contemplated ending my life. I didn't want to. That's not something I chose. So having made that choice, you know, the old I want to live choice, and I want to live happily. Having made those choices, I was forced to recognize what I've just said to you, that I got real clear that I was never going to be able to understand it or figure it out with my mind. I thought, okay, you know what? There must be something more that I don't understand here, the understanding of which would change everything. But I got a pretty good mind. I'm a pretty brilliant guy, so you know, it's tough for me to say that, but it happens to be true. So if I couldn't understand it with my mind, well, then who could? So clearly my mind said, it's not in your mind. That is, it's not in your past data, which is all the mind has, is past data. It's what you need to know and what you yearn to understand exists outside of your past data. That is, outside of the past data of your mind. It exists in the knowing of the soul. So that's what caused me to shift the access of my interior experience. It was purely an intellectual process, I want you to know at the outset. I thought my way to God. I literally thought my way to God. Because my mind said it can't have meant to be like this. Something's going wrong. It's not supposed to be like this. So I'm obviously missing data. What's the data? And when I asked my mind, am I missing data? My mind said, brother, are you ever? But I said, okay, then what is the data? And my mind said, damned if I know. And it was damned. You know, it didn't know. But it did know enough. My mind knew enough to know that it didn't know. I think maturity is when you realize what you don't know. That's been my experience. So
how did that relationship?
I sat there not knowing, you know, and then I had nowhere to go except because thank goodness I was raised in a religious family. I had abandoned the religion of my youth, but at least I had that background. I had that that fundamental background. I was raised in a family of Catholics. And so when I got to the place where I realized I didn't know, and when I knew that I didn't know, you know, it's one thing to not know, but you think you do know. But when I didn't know and I knew that I didn't know, then I went to God. Then I went down on my knees. Now, and this is very private, but I mean, I literally went down on my knees, not just in my head. I literally went down to my knees one night, and I said, God, need a little help here. Help me out. And God said, well, it's about time. All words to that effect. And brought through 27 books. Now I can't shut up.
And how did that relationship to God matured and deepened over time? How did that evolve to where you're at now? Did that change in any way?
No, I was going to say, you're asking me an interesting question. How did that evolve to where I am now? In my own experience, it was all a download, like a download, instantly. And now it's taken me 15 years to write 27 books. You know, I got another book coming out in 2 months, and I got 8 more in my head. All I'm doing is trying to get out the totality of what I was given in that one download. So I can't honestly say, I know it sounds great to say, yeah, I've really evolved, in my relationship with God, but the truth is that once I got in touch with who and what God was and who and what I am in relationship to that, it was an instant experience, and it's not gone anywhere since then. Although my awareness of it, I would say, has expanded as I've looked at it and looked at it and looked at it and looked at it. And as I've been forced to try to explain it to others, by the way, which is why I do interviews like this. You know one of the reasons why I do interviews like this? Because life requires me to try to find words to explain it to yet one more person. And as I do that, I realize that I called you into my experience to give me an opportunity to explain it to myself one more time with even greater clarity. And so, and that's how life works, by the way. Life works that way. We bring people to us and create situations that are perfect for the next step, to allow us to take the next step in our own evolutionary process. That's what I mean when I say you see the gift. Even in the bad stuff that's happening, if you look at the bad stuff, the so-called bad stuff, and you say, there's a gift in here. I brought this person to me, and this person has a gift for me in their hands. I wonder what that is. And you start searching for the gift. And once you find the gift, often even forgiveness of that other person is not necessary. Because when understanding comes in, forgiveness goes out.
I love the saying that you have there.
Bidden or not bidden, God is present. It's a plaque on my wall that she's pointing to, ladies and gentlemen. And the plaque on the wall says, bidden or not bidden, God is present. And that's correct. So that's correct in my experience at least. So every situation that presents itself, even losing your house, even losing your job, even these terrible things you talked about at the beginning of our conversation, all those experiences and events, if we understand what's happening correctly, are gifts to us by life, creating a context within which we get to express and experience at the next level who we really are. And when we see them that way, we convert them into that. And when we convert them into that, we begin to experience them as that. And the energy shift changes the exterior reality often, very quickly, because the exterior reality no longer needs to present itself in that form in order to get our attention.
Yes. Yes. So what would you say, what is love to you?
Oh, what is love to me? Why not ask me some simple questions? What is love to me?
Is God nothing but love?
Well, of course that's true, but the other question is more intriguing. I think to me, love is the loss of the self utterly. It's the loss of the self utterly. I'll tell you how it works. I look at my dog. I've got the cutest dog in the world. I know that other people think they have the cutest dog in the world, but in fact, I am here to announce that my dog happens to be actually the cutest dog in the world. Now, when I look at, and my dog jumps on my lap because my dog knows that I adore him, and he adores me. But when the dog sits on my lap and looks up at me, I love him utterly, to the point where I have lost myself. I actually project my own personality onto the dog. I think I'm looking at myself. And I think I know what he's thinking. I think I know what he wants. I think I know how he's feeling. Oh, are you not feeling so good? Are you feeling kind of sad because Daddy's going to go a little while? And people watch me talk to the dog this way. They go, this guy's already lost it. He's lost it. See? But in fact, losing it is actually finding it. Because when you get into that place, you realize what's happened there is called transference. You've transferred the whole of who you are into the beloved at which you're looking. Now, when that happens with another human being, much less a dog, you found what love means. When I look into the eyes of my beloved wife, it's difficult to talk about here. When I look into the eyes of M, who's the most beautiful person I've ever known, inside and out, I've so lost in her. I'm utterly not there anymore, except when I am. But when I'm not, and I know what that feels like, I'm utterly lost in that other. To me, that's love. When every consideration is their consideration, every concern is their concern, every feeling is their feeling, every desire is their desire, every choice is their choice, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't feel like, oh, I'm giving them that. Oh, look at all I've given you. It's not what I feel. Like I'm doing it out of an act of generosity. That isn't it. That's not love. That's faux love. That's pseudo love. It's when you give yourself up so completely in the presence of another, not out of generosity, but out of realization of what's true, that you are that other, that other is you, and it's suddenly become your experience. So love to me is the direct experience that there's no one else but you. And so you see yourself in the other, you see yourself in your dog, you start to see yourself in the sky, you start to see yourself in the world at large. And that's not a place of ego, that's utter egolessness. It's the loss of ego, but the gaining of one's true identity. It's when you ultimately embrace your true identity. So when I look at my wife, she comes into the room, and when I identify with her so completely that the little Neale, who I thought I was, is not even there anymore, that's love. You ask me what love is, that's what my answer would be. But what do I know? What do I know?
What would be your recommendation for men these days? You're definitely a man of the heart. There's a lot of men watching. Half of the people watching this are men. And what would you say to men right now as a recommendation or advice? Or
well, I don't think that the advice is peculiarly male oriented.
Yeah.
If I were to give advice, it wouldn't be to men. I don't think that penises qualify people to have certain problems that vaginas don't have.
No, just letting the emotion and being as you are. You're very vulnerable, and you get.
I think I would say
you're comfortable with.
I would say I am pretty comfortable, but again, I'm an old person. Old people are more comfortable than young people, from my experience. But the advice that I would give to all people would be to forget all the things you thought you were here to do. Let go of all the reasons you thought life placed you on the earth. Wipe the whole blackboard clean, and come to a deep understanding of who you really are, why you're really here, and who everyone else is. And if you get nothing else except that, the purpose of your life is to express and experience the divinity within you, which I would call love. If you ever get to the place where that becomes true for you, then have the courage and the bravery to step into that. Say it to as many people as possible. Share it with the world if you can, so that you can give notice, so that you can bear witness to your own process, and then go for it and live your life fully in that particular way.
And one last little thing, that we have a tendency as human beings to identify to things. And so when we start experiencing our creative power and seeing the magnificence of things that can come in our life, some people have failed, and that's probably a fear of a lot of human beings, to identify then to those manifestations or to those things as I'm the one that has created that. So how do you remain humble? How do we remain centered and in this place of we're nothing and everything?
Well, I don't have a problem with humility, except when I do, but for me, it's easy to be humble when I am humble, because all I have to do is remember, my failings. So humility is not difficult for me when I'm being authentic with myself. But I'm not quite sure. Ask me that question again.
How can we not identify with what we bring in manifestation in our life, all the magnificence?
Why should we not identify with it? Why wouldn't we?
When we do, the ego kicks in, and then...
Unless it doesn't. Unless we first of all, I do identify with all the magnificence that's come into my life. I totally created this beautiful house. I created the perfect life partner. I created an extraordinary way to express myself in the world. I totally created all of that. I wouldn't deny that for a minute. But that doesn't mean that I somehow am arrogantly not humbled about it. I think that what I'm clear about is that the creation is a co-creation, accomplished through the process of divinity expressing through me, as me. And so I think too much. I think we're asked too much to deny our own magnificence. I never advise anyone to deny your own magnificence. If you've painted a beautiful painting, say so. If you've created a beautiful home, say so. If you've accomplished something magnificent in your life, say so. I did that. I accomplished that. Give yourself credit, but allow yourself to know that, of course you accomplished it. The extraordinary thing would be not to accomplish it. Do you know how much we have to do not to accomplish? You know how much of God's wisdom, God's joy, God's creativity, God's genius, and God's magnificence flows through us, and so the real extraordinary event is when we are not expressing magnificence, because it's all coming to us and coming through us. So it's not unusual for human beings to be utterly magnificent. It's unusual for them not to be. But what's interesting is that we've been taught not to be.
Oh, there's guilt that kicks in from religious background.
Not just religious, but in every sociological way you could mention. Culturally, in every other way. We were told as children, I was, to be seen and not heard. And I got all kinds of messages around that. And so because somehow somebody convinced us that God wants us to be humble. That humility, a false humility, we're talking about false humility here. I'm not saying, humble, the word humble is a very slippery word, because of course we don't want to be abrasively arrogant, but false humility, the aw shucks kind of humility. You know what I don't like? Somebody walks in and they look fantastic. They look gorgeous. They're dressed to kill, and their presence is magnificent. And you know what? They know it because they spent an hour and a half getting there. It's not like they had no effort. They spent there, with the makeup and did the hair, and put the thing on and picked the right dress. No, not that one, not this one. They took 3 minutes, or 3 hours to get the right dress, and then they sweep into the room and you say, you look magnificent. What an incredible dress. And they say, oh, this old thing? Help me out. See, show me a woman who you say, or a man for that matter, who you say, you look magnificent, and they say, thank you, I think so too. I did a good job this morning. Oh, okay. That's the I shouldn't tell this story on my wife, but I will. My wife is an extraordinarily exquisite person in every way. When she walks into the room, I say, you look incredible. She'll go, thanks, I know. She doesn't kid around. She doesn't get false humility. But she doesn't say it arrogantly. It's not a put-off. Nobody's put off by it. You just go, oh, there's a person who knows exactly what's true. And she can step into her own, the glory of who she is, without making anyone else feel less, or feel small, or feel somehow not enough. So I'm all for embracing the glory and the wonder of who we are. But I think there's a way to do that without making anybody else feel somehow less. And in fact, the way to do that is something else that Em often adds when I say those things to her. Now that I'm thinking about it. And I say, you look incredible tonight. She'll say, thanks, I know. And so do you. Yeah, right?
Yes.
See, so it's about sharing the wealth, sharing the magnificence, seeing in another what they see in you. For that matter, seeing in another what you see in you when you see the best in you.
So in some way, by doing that, by honoring who we are fully, we're mirroring back the greatness of another.
Of course. Of course.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much.
Why didn't I say that? I could have put it in one sentence like that. So never ask a writer to give you a one-sentence answer.
Thank you for this delicious, intimate moment. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. It was fun.
Thank you. Much love, my beautiful co-creators from Ashland in Oregon. Bye-bye.
Fully, and I want to say immediately, as quickly as our mind will allow.
Even if all the outside doesn't
Well,
show any
especially
proof
for all
of
the
that.
outside. You see, judge not by appearances. You see, the mind will create one story after the other to convince us that what is really true at a spiritual, metaphysical level is not true. We've fallen down the rabbit hole, and we're listening to the Mad Hatter. He's pouring tea into a cup with no bottom, and he is swearing that what is so is not so, and what is not so is so. And we've bought into the illusion. We've taken the blue pill, and instead of the red pill, and so we're in the matrix. And we are believing what the matrix is showing us rather than what we know to be really true. So especially if the appearances are dire and horrible and look like there's no way out. So in addition to bringing wonderful thoughts and wonderful new ideas and new resources to our life, in addition to that, we call upon the universal source of all power to provide us with just the right opportunity, just the right opening to get us out of this mess that we're in. You know, my favorite prayer is this one. Thank you, God, for helping me to understand that this problem has already been solved for me. Has already been solved for me. So instead of trying to call a solution to us, instead of asking God for help or trying to bring a solution to us, we are announcing that the solution is already here. And our opportunity is to step into it. And to step into it, I think I would say the most basic need is your spiritual growth. And even if they're struggling for what you call basic needs, I think that is not when the struggle for spiritual growth should be subordinated or made less, but in fact probably made more, increased. Because if there's going to be any, how would I put it, resource that would be powerful and extraordinarily helpful during difficult times, it would be God and our connection with the divine and our ability to touch in with the part of the divine that exists in us. So I think that the first thing I would say to people who are enduring difficult times
Hello my beautiful co-creators, Lidu here from amazing Ashland in Oregon on this beautiful Juicy Living tour, and today I'm with Neale Donald Walsch. Hello Neale.
Hi.
It's wonderful to be here with you. You definitely made an impact in my life and impacted millions and millions of people's life with your book, Conversations with God.
I'm very glad that's true. Thank you for saying that. That was my hope, that it would make a positive impact on the lives of people.
Yeah, there's a lot of people right now going through poverty and a lot of hardships. You actually, right outside of here, somewhere outside of Ashland, from what I'm hearing, used to live in a tent and was struggling to find the food, the money to be able to eat. What would be your recommendation for people going through really hard times right now to still connect to their spiritual, that want still spiritual growth, but are struggling with the basic needs?
Is to not disconnect, but reconnect with the part of themselves that is an aspect of divinity itself. And here's why. In addition to simply providing comfort, when we open ourselves to the divinity that is within each of us, when we get in touch with what my friend Gary Zukav would call the seat of the soul, we open ourselves to a level of wisdom and insight about life and how it works that provides us opportunities to embrace ideas, thoughts, solutions, approaches to the problem that I swear we never would have thought of before. We start seeing life in a whole different way. And we also